Hey guys, welcome back to HOA Stories. In today's Ripestories video, imagine buying your dream home only to have an HOA you are not even a part of start fining you for your grass, your lights, even your garden hose. Sounds ridiculous, right? Well, it got even worse because one day their president broke into my backyard and what I caught next changed everything. Let's dive right into the story. And the first one is titled, "My camera caught an HOA-Karen breaking into my backyard. The HOA then threatened to sue me for illegal filming." So I'm a guy in my mid-30s, I work in IT, pretty quiet, keep to myself. At the time all this started I was living alone, I'm engaged now, but that came later. A few months before any of this started, I bought my first house. It's a small place at the edge of a development, built before the rest of the neighborhood was even planned. The neighborhood has an HOA, but my property does not. This is important. When I bought the house, my real estate agent walked me through the title work twice because she said the situation can be confusing. Basically, when the developer built the rest of the homes around my lot was already there with its own deed and was never folded into the HOA. There's no recorded covenant on my property and I have no agreement with them. I pay them nothing and they have zero authority over what I do with my house, my fence, my yard or my mailbox. I made the mistake of assuming the HOA also knew this, and within a week of moving in, I got my first knock on the door. A woman in her late 50s, perfectly blow-dried hair, clipboard in hand, wearing a bright pink visor like it was a uniform, she introduced herself as the head of the architectural committee. Her name was Becca and she welcomed me to the neighborhood. Then immediately handed me a stapled stack of papers. She said it was the rules that I needed to follow. I told her thanks, took the papers to be polite and shut the door. I did not read them. I mean, why would I? 2 days later, another knock. It was Becca again. This time she was upset because I had a contractor's truck parked in my driveway. The contractor was installing my dishwasher. She told me that overnight commercial vehicles were not allowed and that the truck had been there for over an hour. I told her the guy was working inside my house and she told me that he could park on the street. I pointed out that the street was also lined with cars and there was nowhere for him to go. Well, she huffed, made a note on her clipboard and walked off without even answering. Later that night I read the papers she gave me, just out of curiosity really. The whole thing was about exterior paint colors, holiday decorations, lawn height, what kind of mailbox you could have, all of it, and none of it applied to me. I tossed the papers in the recycling bin and figured that she would eventually figure it out. And that, I guess, Ripe stars, not to shatter any of your dreams here, that is like hoping for Santa Claus to be real. Because there's no way an HOA-Karen will ever figure it out by herself. Anyway, unfortunately, she did not figure it out. Over the next several weeks, I got hit with what I can only describe as a slow, weird, escalating campaign. She left notes in my mailbox, real ones with bullet points and red highlighter. She emailed me. I'm still not sure how she got my email address. She left voicemails and she even printed out photos of my yard, once with arrows, pointing at things she did not like. The arrows pointed at, I kid you not, my garden hose. The complaints were just ridiculous. My grass was a 1/4 inch too tall for her, my recycling bin was visible from the street on a non-recycling day, and my porch light was the wrong temperature of bulb, whatever that means. My front door wreath was seasonally inappropriate, and I had a wreath up in October that, according to her, looked too summery. I bought it from a literal autumn aisle. Every single time I told her calmly that I was not part of the HOA and that I would appreciate it if she stopped contacting me. By the way, Ripe stars, I forgot to say, I apologize if my voice still sounds a little bit weird, but I think I'm still a little bit sick, so apologies in advance. Anyway, every single time she would respond with something like, "Every home in this neighborhood is part of the HOA, sir. I would suggest you read your closing documents." Well, I had read them, and that was the funny part. My title attorney had triple-checked, I had a clean deed and not a single covenant attached. Around the second month, things got even worse. She called the police on me twice, once because I had a fire pit going in my backyard with 2 friends drinking beer on a Saturday night. Officers showed up, looked at my fire pit and asked if I had a hose nearby, told me to enjoy my night and then left. The second time was because she claimed I had a so-called unregistered vehicle on my property. It was my work van, which is registered to my employer, and was parked there for one night because I had an early morning install the next day. The officer that time looked genuinely tired. He asked who keeps reporting me, and I told him about it. He sighed in a way that told me that she had been keeping the local department very busy, but now we get to the fence. So my backyard has a wooden privacy fence. It was there when I bought the house. It is not pretty, it is not new, but it does its job. About 2 months in, Becca decided that my fence was her new project. She sent me a long email saying that the fence violated 3 different neighborhood standards and that the height was wrong, that the wood color was wrong, and that I had until the end of the month to replace it or face fines. I did not even respond to that. I just blocked her email and went on with my life. A week later, I came home to find a cardboard sign zip-tied to my front gate that said, "Property under review." I took it down, threw it in the trash, and went inside. The next day she was on my porch again. I cracked the door, didn't even open it all the way, and she told me that she had been informed by the HOA's lawyer that my fence was illegally constructed, and that if I did not allow an inspection, the HOA would be forced to take action. I told her for what felt like the 100th time that I was not a member, I had never signed anything, and to please leave my property. She said, and this is a direct quote because it's burned into my brain, "You don't get to opt out of a community." I shut the door. That night I emailed my lawyer, the same guy who did my closing, just to make sure I was not crazy here. And by the way guys, if you would have been in this situation, what would you have done about this Karen? Obviously, you can opt out of a community, especially if the community in question is a crazy HOA, or at least OP can in his situation. By the way, if you guys ever found your dream home for a super reasonable cheap price, would you buy the house if it is part of an HOA? For me, it would definitely warrant a second thought, because no matter the price, having to deal with this kind of headache maybe every single day severely diminishes the property values if you ask me. Anyway, if you enjoy the HOA stories, please don't forget to like the video and post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support me. Thank you so much. Anyway, my lawyer confirmed for the 3rd or 4th time that I had no obligation to the HOA whatsoever and that any fines they tried to issue would be unenforceable. He told me to keep records of everything and to install cameras if I hadn't already, because in his experience these situations sometimes escalate. That advice probably saved me thousands of dollars. I had a basic doorbell camera already, and that weekend I added 2 more cameras, one on the back of the house pointing at the patio and one on the corner of the garage pointing along the side yard towards the gate that leads to the backyard. Both had decent night vision and motion alerts that pinged my phone. I also added a small one inside the gate, kind of hidden, pointing at the side of the fence line. I felt a little paranoid setting all that up for an old lady in a pink visor, but it turns out I should have been more paranoid. The next week I was at work in the middle of a meeting when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the side yard camera. I usually ignore them because the mailman triggers them, squirrels or whatever. However, it kept buzzing, 3 pings in a row. I excused myself, went into the hallway and opened the app. What I saw made me almost drop my phone. There was Becca in a sun hat, walking up my driveway with a large tote bag. She went straight to the side gate of my fence. She tried the latch. It was locked from the inside like always. She stood there for a second looking around, and then she pulled something out of her tote bag. I couldn't tell what it was at first, but then I realized it was a small pry bar, like the kind you get at a hardware store. She walked along the fence line for a bit, found one of the older panels. The wood was weathered and the nails were probably loose already, and started prying it. The whole panel then pops off. She tossed it to the side, then bent down and stepped through the gap into my backyard. The inside camera picked her up immediately. She walked all around my yard, taking photos of my deck, my AC unit, my fence from the inside, even my back door. She measured the height of my fence with a tape measure she pulled out of the same bag. She wrote things down on a notepad, and she was back there for almost 12 minutes. Then she squeezed back through the broken panel, tried and failed to put it back where it was, and walked off down the sidewalk like she had just been on a pleasant stroll. I was sitting in the hallway at work just staring at my phone. My hands were tingling. I think I sat there for 10 minutes before I went back in and told my boss that I had a family emergency and had to go home. Driving home, I went through about every emotion you can have, furious, then nervous, then weirdly excited, because I just knew, this was the moment everything was gonna flip on her. My lawyer had told me to keep records that I had. When I got home, the panel was still leaning against the fence where she had left it. I didn't touch it. I took photos, I took videos, I took photos of the dirt where her shoes had been. Then I went inside and downloaded every clip from every camera, every angle, timestamped the works. I sent it all to my lawyer with the subject line, "She actually did it." He called me within 20 minutes. I've never heard a lawyer laugh that hard before in my life. He told me to file a police report immediately in person, not over the phone, and to bring a USB drive with the footage. He said the magic words I'd be using were trespassing, criminal mischief, and destruction of property. I went to the police station that afternoon and I had to explain the whole HOA backstory, because the officer at the desk kept assuming that I was the one trespassing somehow. Don't ask me why, but once I showed him the footage, his entire face changed. He then called another officer over to watch it, and they both watched her pry the panel off twice. The second officer just shook his head and said something like, "What is wrong with people?" And they took the report seriously. They told me they would send someone out to talk to her. I went home, made myself a sandwich, and tried to act like a normal person for the rest of the night. Some days later, I got a knock on my door. It was Becca, of course, standing there with a face that could have ignited gasoline. Behind her, a guy in a polo shirt I didn't recognize. He introduced himself as the HOA board's vice president. She did not even let him talk. She launched right in instead. She said she knew what I had done. I asked her to be more specific. She said that I had been spying on private HOA officials in the course of their duties, and that I was in violation of state recording laws. She said the HOA's attorney had been informed and that I should expect a formal complaint within the week. I want to make sure you guys understand how unhinged this is. I mean, she broke into my backyard, I have video of her breaking in, and she came to my door to tell me that I was the one in trouble for filming it. The vice president shifted around uncomfortably. He looked like a man who had been told one version of the story and was starting to suspect that there was another one. I asked him point blank if he had personally watched any video or if he was just here because she said so, and he hesitated. Becca jumped in and said the evidence was being reviewed by the council and that I should lawyer up. I closed the door without saying another word. Then I called my lawyer, and a few days later I got a letter in the mail. It was from a law firm 2 towns over, the HOA's lawyer supposedly. The letter accused me of unlawful surveillance, invasion of privacy, harassment of a board member, and demanded that I take down all my exterior cameras and pay a fine of $3,000 to the HOA for damages to community standing. It said if I didn't comply within 14 days, the HOA would file suit. I'll be honest, the first time I read it I felt a little sick. Even when you know you're in the right, getting a legal threat in the mail is not really fun. I called my lawyer again and read him the whole thing. He laughed again. He told me not to worry, that this was in his words a steaming pile of nothing, but that we should respond properly so it didn't drag out. He drafted a response in less than a day. The response was simple. It pointed out 3 things. 1, that my client is not a member of your HOA and has no contact with you. Number 2, the cameras on my client's property recording his property, which is fully legal in our state. 3, your client is currently the subject of a police investigation for breaking and entering my client's property, and we have video evidence to that effect. The letter ended with a note that if the HOA filed suit, we would countersue for harassment, defamation, and damages, and we would also be making the video evidence part of the public court record. He sent it in certified mail. We waited. What I didn't know at the time was that the HOA was already in trouble. I found this out later from a neighbor who lives 2 doors down. He's a friendly guy who installs HVAC systems and was one of the first people to introduce himself when I moved in. He told me there was a faction in the HOA that was sick of Becca. Apparently she had been a problem for years already. She had been sued by another neighbor before for something similar, and that case settled quietly. The board had been warned to keep her in check, but they hadn't. Now, with my lawyer's letter in their inbox and a police report with her name on it, the board was, in his words, freaking out. Did they back down? Of course not. That would have been the smart move, but instead Becca apparently convinced the board that I was bluffing, that the police thing was a misunderstanding, and that if they pushed even harder, I would fold. She was again, according to my neighbor, very persuasive when she wanted to be. The board voted to proceed with the lawsuit. barely. It was apparently a 5-4 vote. The HOA filed suit against me about 3 weeks later. The filing was almost word for word the same as the letter. Unlawful surveillance, supposedly, harassment, demand for fines, demand that I remove my cameras. My lawyer told me to relax and that this would be over before it even really started, and he was almost right. Almost. The first thing he did was to file a counterclaim for us. The counterclaim was for trespass and property damage, plus a request for a restraining order against Becca specifically, and damages for the broken fence panel and emotional distress as well. He also filed a motion to dismiss the HOA's claim on the grounds that I was not a member of the HOA and that the cameras were legal. Separately, the criminal side of things, the trespass and criminal mischief charges, was already moving forward through the police report I had filed, which was out of my hands at that point and in the prosecutor's lap. The HOA's lawyer apparently had not been told about the broken fence. I'm guessing Becca left that part out when she briefed him. When my lawyer attached the video footage to the counterclaim filing, the HOA's lawyer responded by requesting an emergency call. My lawyer told me that he picked up the phone and the guy on the other end sounded like he had aged 10 years in 3 days. The HOA's lawyer now wanted to settle. He offered to drop the lawsuit if I dropped the counterclaim and agreed not to talk publicly about the case, but my lawyer said no. He said the broken fence was a criminal matter and that part was not ours to drop. That was up to the prosecutor's office, not me. He also said that if the HOA wanted to walk away cleanly on the civil side, they were going to have to pay for the fence repair, and Becca was going to have to step down from the board. This is the part where the HOA could have saved themselves a lot of money, but instead the board voted again. And again it was close, but they decided to keep fighting on the surveillance claim, while quietly trying to settle the trespass piece. Don't ask me how that makes sense, it just doesn't. It was, I think, the only way they could save face internally without admitting that Becca had done something wrong. The next 2 months were a slow grind. My lawyer dealt with most of it, I had to give a short statement once, and Becca, from what I heard, was instructed by everyone around her not to speak to me, not to email me, not even to drive past my house. She apparently couldn't stop herself though. She drove past my house slowly, almost every single day, and my side camera caught her every time. We locked it, of course, but meanwhile the HOA was hemorrhaging money. Their lawyer was charging them for every filing, every motion, every phone call. My lawyer told me later that between the filings, motions, phone calls, and the failed angles, their attorney kept trying. The HOA was sitting at tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees by the end of it, for a case they had no chance of winning, and they tried different angles. They argued that even though I was not part of the HOA, I benefited from neighborhood services and was therefore subject to its rules. The judge threw that out almost immediately. They argued that my cameras captured the public sidewalk in the background and were therefore illegal. My lawyer pointed out with case citations that recording a public sidewalk from your own property is 100% legal. The judge threw that one out too. Eventually, the HOA's lawyer requested a settlement conference. I almost felt bad for the regular HOA members who were footing the bill through their dues. Almost. The settlement was frankly embarrassing for them. They dropped all claims against me, and they paid for the fence panel repair, which was about $200. They also paid for my legal fees, and they issued a written statement signed by the board formally acknowledging that I'm not a member of the HOA and that they would not contact me again about HOA matters. Becca got a small fine, community service, and a no-contact order against me. She also had to step down from the board, and the day she signed those papers was, I will admit, one of the more satisfying days of my year. The aftermath has been quiet, which is what I wanted all along. Becca moved out about 2 months after the case ended. I heard from my HVAC neighbor that her husband had been begging her to move for years and that this finally pushed him over the edge. I have no idea where she went, and I don't care. The HOA itself has been weirdly polite to me ever since. The new board president actually came over a few weeks ago, knocked on my door, and asked if I wanted to be on the email list for neighborhood social events. No mention of joining, no rules talk. Just an invite to a block party. I told him I would think about it. He said no pressure, smiled, and walked off. I almost didn't recognize the interaction as something that came from the same organization. And the next one is a fantastic HOA story from r/FHOA. It is titled "Screwing the HOA from the Inside, a Boomer's Mission." So my dad joined his HOA twice because he hates HOAs. The first time, he pushed back when the president wanted to spend money on a French drain. My dad, as the treasurer of the HOA, wanted to verify that the HOA was responsible for the drain as opposed to the city. He probably was not too tactful with it. He also refused to put a lien on someone's house for delinquent dues. The delinquency was less than $100. The president thought it would be best if my dad stepped down. That president resigned and the new one asked my dad if he would return as the treasurer. He agreed. The president pulled the same BS as the old one, with liens over delinquent dues and so on, and my dad once again refused and told him that he's a terrible neighbor and even worse human being. The HOA president relented. One Saturday morning, a young widow showed up at my parents' door in tears, saying that the president won't let her pay dues, and the unpaid dues are preventing her from settling her, also young, late husband estate. My dad then accepted a check from her on the spot and emailed the probate attorney with proof of payment. He CC'd the president of the HOA. He also likes to respond to the president's emails with things like, "Why are you so long-winded?" and "None of this information is important," or just plain ignores them. And yeah guys, as someone in the comments noted, the best HOA board members are the ones who hate HOAs themselves. And then someone in the comments actually responded, "That is why I am on my HOA board myself. I hate them, but they are sneaky and busy recruiting enough like-minded members to outvote us more reasonable members." And yeah guys, honestly, that is one of the best things you can do. Try to destroy an HOA from the inside. I hope you enjoyed today's video and I will see you again tomorrow.